Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. We will be talking about assessing a financial advisor's qualifications. So before I begin, I would just like to do an acknowledgement of country, and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and the custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respect to their elders past and present, and extend this respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. My name is Natasha Bronkhorst, and I am a senior analyst within our financial advisors team, and I'll be presenting your webinar today. With me, I also have Claire Clegg, who is a senior lawyer within the same team, and she will be doing our questions and answers section at the end of the webinar. We also have Sophie De Corpo, who is a senior specialist within the team. She's off camera today, but if you send through any questions, she will be collating them in the background for us to answer as we go. In relation to general housekeeping, we are recording this webinar and we will publish this on the ASIC website for future resources for AFS licensees and relevant providers. So in that case, if you don't want your face to be recorded, please turn off your camera. Today we are talking about assessing qualifications for relevant providers, and our webinar structure will be as follows. We'll give a brief overview of the qualification standard and how they apply to each bucket of relevant providers. We will talk through the structure of the determination and how to read the determination and know where to go to assess which qualifications. We will also have a brief discussion about the obligations to notify ASIC about a relevant provider's education and training, including the time frame for which you need to do this. We will then work through some work examples. It is important to note that we will be doing this in an ASIC test environment. So while the screens will look largely the same as what you will see on the ASIC Connect portal, it might be slightly slower. There might be slight variations in this. And then, as I mentioned, lastly, we'll do a question and answer section with Claire. At the top of your Teams, there is a button for questions and answers. Please feel free to use that now. And if you've got any questions that arise as we go through the webinar, please send them through. It is important to note, though, that ASIC won't be giving any legal advice during this webinar, but if you've got a particular question about how the determination works or the qualification standard, we will endeavour to answer that. It is possible that we may not get to all of the questions in this webinar. So if that is the case, we will publish the questions and answers following the webinar as part of our training and resource guides. Apologies. So let's start with an overview of the qualification standard. So it is very important to note that the qualification standard applies differently depending on which bucket of relevant providers you fall into. So when we talk about relevant providers who are existing providers, they generally have until 1 January 2026 to meet the qualification standards. They generally require an approved degree, which is a bachelor's degree at an AFQ level 7 or higher. They can also have an equivalent qualification. Some relevant providers who are existing providers may also be able to rely on the experienced provider pathway to meet the qualification standard. So it is important to note that existing providers and experienced providers, they are defined in the Corporations Act. And generally, to be an existing provider, you must have been on the Financial Advisors Register between 1 January 2016 and 1 January 2019 and have not been banned or disqualified as at 1 January 2019. To be an experienced provider, you must have had at least 10 years of practicing experience, and there's a time frame for 2007 to 2021, and you must have had a clean disciplinary record as well. This webinar, we won't be focusing too much about the experienced provider pathway. However, ASIC has released an info sheet 281 that can provide more information on this. For relevant providers who are not existing providers, so this generally includes any people who are new to the industry, as well as relevant providers who did not pass the exam by their exam cutoff date and remained authorised. They are required to have an approved bachelor's degree or qualification. We also then have certain relevant providers who will have foreign qualifications. You can apply to Treasury to have these assessed because the determination that we're walking through today is only for Australian approved degrees. But it is important to note that unless you also meet the definition of an existing provider, it is very likely that you will also need an Australian approved degree. So we will now talk a little bit about the determination. So I do have the determination up on the screen, and you're welcome to open up a copy yourself and follow along. So the determination's name is the Corporation's Relevant Providers Degree Qualifications and Courses Standard Determination 2021. What we will go through at the moment is just the structure of the determination. So we can see that it is broken into parts. So part 1, it provides preliminary information such as the name of the determination, its authority, but the section that we are most interested in is section 5, which is where we will go to be finding definitions and certain terms. We then have part 2, which deals with approval of degrees and qualifications. So within part 2, it's section 6. And there's 3 key sections, and section 6, part 1, deals with qualifications and degrees, and it says that if they are listed in Schedule 1, they are generally an approved degree. Section 6, subsection 2, paragraph A, states that there is a requirement for everyone or all the degrees to include an ethics unit unless there is an exemption, and we'll go through this a little bit in more detail today. Paragraph B of the same section number states that if there are other conditions specified in Schedule 1, they also must be completed to be part of the approved degree. We also then have section 6, subsection 3, which states that an ethics unit is not required for some master's degrees. It is important to note that this is only an overview of the section, and licensees and relevant providers should review these sections in detail to ensure they meet each of the conditions as specified. So part 3, we can see here, talks about existing providers and the qualification and qualifications that are equivalent to the training and education standard. So we will deal with this in our example today, and this is an alternative way for people who are existing providers to also meet the qualification standard. So they might not necessarily have an approved degree, but they would have a qualification that's equivalent to meeting that standard. We then get into Schedule 1, which deals with degrees and qualifications. So Schedule 1 is broken up into 2 parts. Firstly, we've got part 1, which deals with bachelor's degrees. So if I have got a bachelor degree, I will be going to Schedule 1, part 1 to see whether or not it's an approved degree, including if there are any conditions or, whether I need to complete an ethics unit. If I have got a postgraduate degree, so this would be generally a master's degree or a doctoral degree, I will be going to Schedule 1, but part 2 to see whether or not that qualification is listed. Lastly, for the determination, we then have Schedule 2, which deals with courses and units of study, and these are generally setting out the bridging units that are approved for the purposes of this determination. As mentioned before, there is an obligation to notify ASIC of a relevant provider's education and training as they're completed by the relevant provider. And ultimately, it's up to the licensees to notify ASIC of this via ASIC Connect. The lodgement must be submitted within 30 business days, and it is done via ASIC Connect using an appoint or maintain transaction. So if the licensee is notifying ASIC of the appointment in the first instance, you can do this using an appoint transaction. However, if the relevant provider has already been appointed and you are updating their details, you can do this via a maintain transaction. It is important to note that in the qualifications and training section, there is a new tick box that says this is a qualification course and or unit of study that goes towards meeting the qualification as set out in section 921B, subsection 2 of the Corporations Act. So if your relevant provider has met the qualification standard, you will be ticking this box. So for generally for existing providers, but for some other relevant providers as well, you may need to tick 2 or 3 education as uploaded into ASIC to show that the qualification standard has been met. We do often get asked exactly what information needs to be entered into ASIC Connect, and licensees are required to provide us details about qualification and courses that are relevant to the provision of financial services. So this is ultimately for licensees to determine. But as I mentioned before, how the relevant provider meets the education standard is what we would at least expect to see in here. So we'll go through our worked example now. And as I mentioned, this will include entering some information onto ASIC Connect. It is important to note that we're using a test environment. So the details that we provide and enter into the financial advisor register on this instance is just used for the purposes of training. So they don't represent a real person. So our first example is for Lafo, who is known as Lulu by her co-workers and AFS licensee. So she has completed a Bachelor of Commerce Financial Planning degree at Griffith University. She commenced her studies in semester 1 of 2020, and she completed this degree in 2024. She is not relying on the experienced provider pathway. So these particulars will all are all pertinent for when we firstly assess the qualification against the determination, and secondly, when we enter her details onto the financial advisor register. So for step 1, we need to first determine what is the level of her qualification. So as we can remember, they need relevant providers need at least an AFQ level 7 or higher. And a bachelor's degree, which is what Lulu has got, is an AFQ level 7. I can also see on the slide that for undergraduate degrees, such as a bachelor's degree or a bachelor's degrees with honours, I need to go to Schedule 1, Part 1, to see whether or not her degree is approved. As mentioned before, any postgraduate degree, such as a doctoral, master's degree, or a graduate diploma, we would be going to Schedule 1, but Part 2 of the determination. So what I'm going to do now is just scroll down till I can find Schedule 1, Part 1, and that is where I'm going to start my assessment. Here we go. So I can see Schedule 1, degrees and qualifications, and then I can see Part 1, bachelor's degree. So I know that I am in the right section. So what I need to do now is I need to search for the higher education provider. So I can see here that the first university that's listed is Central Queensland University. So it is important to note that they're listed alphabetically. So I can scroll down until I can find Griffith University. I might need to do a bit of scrolling depending on how many degrees are approved before we get to Griffith University. And I can see that Griffith University has got some degrees that are approved, starting on page 32 of the determination. So we'll just, before we go any further, we'll just quickly talk about what exactly is on this page. So I can see they've all got a number down the left-hand side, and it's just a number, like each education or course has got a number next to it. It just makes it a little bit easier to identify and work through. I then have the university name up the top, and then each of the degrees that are approved for the purposes of this determination is listed in column 2. I then in column 3 have a condition, and certain degrees are required to have been commenced or completed or both within a certain time frame, and this is specified in column 3. Column 4 lists any other condition. So this is where I will see whether or not an ethics unit is not required, or whether as part of the degree I'm required to complete a specific unit. So sometimes it might specify that you also need to do, let's say, investment. So if that's a condition of the degree, it will be specified in the other conditions column. So I can see that Griffith University, if I scroll down, has got a range of courses that have all been approved. And that goes until the last item number on my list for Griffith University is 29AC. So what I need to do now is, I know that there's a higher education provider, Griffith University is listed in Schedule 1. I now need to find Lulu's exact degree. So if we go back to the facts of our case, we know that she has completed a Bachelor of Commerce Financial Planning. And I can see here that it is listed at item 28A. It is important to note that the name needs to match exactly, otherwise it might be a different degree and it's not in the determination as an approved degree. So I have found Lulu's education, I now need to make sure that she has commenced her degree within the relevant time frame. So I can see here that the relevant provider is required to have commenced the relevant degree on or after February 2019. So based on our facts, we know that Lulu commenced her studying in semester 1 of 2020, which is within this time frame. We then need to confirm whether or not she needs to complete an ethics unit or whether any other conditions apply. So it is important to note that for a bachelor's degree, an ethics unit is required unless it is specified otherwise in the relevant conditions tab. So we can see here for Lulu, it says that paragraph 2AC, apologies for that, paragraph 2 sub 2A does not apply to this qualification about the ethics and the bridging unit. So I can see there that she is not required to complete an ethics unit. As mentioned before, if she's required to complete any specific subject as part of a degree, they would be listed here. However, for the Bachelor of Commerce and Financial Planning, nothing additional is specified. So therefore, we know that Lulu has completed an approved degree, and that is a qualification that meets the qualification standard. So we will now talk about how the licensee will enter this onto the Financial Advisors Register. So from here, I would navigate to ASIC Connect. And after I have logged in, I will go to the Lodgements and Notifications tab up the top. I will select the licensee that I'm lodging this submission for. Most authorised lodgers would probably only have one licensee. However, sometimes you might have two licensees listed here. So make sure that you pick the one that you are lodging this transaction for. And then what I will be doing is I need to select the transaction type that I'm submitting. So like I said before, if I'm appointing Lulu for the first time, I would use Appoint Advisor. That's a transaction I would use. However, as she is already authorised under my licence and I've already appointed her, I'll be using the Maintain transaction. And I will select Go. So from here, we know that for Lulu, she has been authorised directly under the licensee, but if she was authorised by a representative of the licensee, I would select the second radio button. I will be asked to include her representative number. But just bear with us a moment, it's a little bit slow being in the test environment. But here I can see that I need to provide the representative's representative number. So this is what it looks like when you log into a Maintain transaction. So we are first asked to identify what details we are updating. So if we are changing an appointment type, we can do that now. So for instance, she might have been going from a provisional relevant provider to a full relevant provider. We would select that. If we are updating a principal place of business, email or a phone number, we do that in the same box as well. Oh, sorry, under the address box. If there's an update to a professional association membership, so we can update that. For us today, we are looking at her qualifications and training courses, but in the same transaction, we can also update information about her ability to provide tax financial advice services and if she has had a failure to meet any CPD requirements. So from here, I also need to include the effective date. So this is the date that she would have completed her degree. And in our scenario, she has finished it in 2024. So we'll assume that she recently completed it at, let's say she completed it yesterday. Because remember, licensees have up to 30 business days to update the Financial Advisor Register. It is important to understand that there will be a fee to submit this Maintain transaction. However, you might as well use this opportunity to review all of her information and ensure that it is all correct. So I will just proceed to the next page. And here I can see that we are first asked about a question about whether or not she is relying on the experienced provider pathway. So as mentioned before, this is an alternative way to meet the qualification standard. And to be an experienced provider, you must have been a relevant provider for at least 10 years during the period of 1 January 2007 to 31 December 2021 and have had a clean disciplinary record as of 31 December 2021. So in our facts, we know that Lulu is not relying on the experienced provider pathway. So I will select no, and I will then be asked to enter details of her qualification and training courses. So in here, we can add up to 10 qualifications that are relevant to the provision of financial advice services. We can see that her previous licensee has entered a course called the Financial Advisor course at a financial advisor provider, and she attained this degree in 2014. So the licensee has reviewed this and determined that it's missing some particulars and it's no longer relevant for her, so we will remove this education. So what I will do now is I will enter the details of her qualification, which she has completed to meet the qualification standard. So we will select the type of course from the drop-down list, and we know that she has got a graduate diploma, which is, a bachelor's degree, which is an AFQ level 7. So we will select that from the drop-down list. We will enter the name of the course. And it is important for this name to match exactly as it appears in the determination. So if I just go back to the determination for a second, I can see it's Bachelor of Commerce, Financial Planning in brackets. So I need to make sure that I have got the details exactly like that. Bachelor of Commerce, Financial Planning in brackets. The provider or institute where Lulu completed her degree was Griffith University, and she completed her degree in 2024. So this is the box that we talked about before, and the box asks, this is a qualification, course and or unit of study that goes towards meeting the qualification standard as set out in section 921B, subsection 2 of the Corporations Act. So because this is an approved degree and it allows Lulu to meet the qualification standard, I will be ticking this tick box as well. I'll be saving Lulu's details now. And I can see here that under the qualification standard, I can see that this degree has been ticked, and it means that it's going towards her meeting that qualification standard. So from here, I'll just proceed to next. And I will just pause for a moment because we have another worked example that we are also working through. So for our second example, it is a little bit more complicated. So we have got Fred. He has completed a Bachelor of Business Finance degree at Queensland University of Technology in 2015. For him, we also have a list of the units that he has completed. It is important to note it's not an exhaustive list, but the units include investments, accounting, banking, finance, estate law, economics, corporations law, and taxation. We also have the course codes for his corporations law and taxation courses, and this is important for later down the track. We also know that Fred has completed an advanced diploma of financial services, financial planning at Kaplan Higher Education Kaplan Higher Education, and he has completed this in 2017. The facts also tell us that Fred is an existing provider, and this is because he was authorised to provide personal advice to retail clients on 16 July 2017, and he was not banned or disqualified from providing personal advice to retail clients on 1 January 2019. We also know that Fred is not relying on the experienced provider pathway. So once again, we need to start by assessing the level of qualification that Fred's got. So we know that Fred also has a bachelor's degree, and we know that a bachelor's degree is a QF level 7. And as this undergraduate degree, we need to have a look at Schedule 1, Part 1. So as I said before, if he were to have a master's degree or a doctoral degree, we would be searching in Schedule 1, Part 2 for his qualification. So I will just go to the start of Schedule 1 again. And what I'm going to do this time, instead of scrolling all the way down to Queensland University, I'm just going to do a control find, and I'm going to search for Queensland University. And I can see here that Queensland University of Technology is listed at item 31. If I scroll down, I see that the next university on the list is Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, which means that QUT only has one approved degree. So for the next step, I need to see whether or not the degree name matches the degree that Fred's got. And I can see here that the approved degree is a Bachelor of Business, Financial Planning, 9-unit specialisation. However, Fred has got a Bachelor of Business, Finance degree, and this is not listed in Schedule 1. It therefore means that Fred does not have an approved degree. However, because he is an existing provider, he might be able to meet the qualification by obtaining an equivalent qualification. But as I said before, we just also need to confirm that he meets the criteria of being an existing provider. And because he was authorised to provide personal advice to retail clients on 16 July 2017, and that's between the period of 1 January 2016 and 1 January 2019, and he was not banned or disqualified from providing personal advice to retail clients on 1 January 2019, he is taken to be an existing provider. So this is where it becomes a little bit more involved. So what we need to do now is, as he is an existing provider, we need to see what alternative pathways is open to him. So I have just scrolled to part 3 with the heading Existing Providers, Qualifications Equivalent to the Education and Training Standard. So there are a number of ways in which an existing provider can meet the qualification standard by having an equivalent qualification. So it starts from having an approved degree all the way down to having no degree. So what we need to do is we need to see which of these items corresponds to Fred's personal circumstances. So the licensee reviews the list here, and we think that he might have a relevant degree and an ADFP. However, before we mark that down, we need to first confirm that that is in fact the case. So I need to first know what is a relevant degree. So I will scroll up to section 5 where we have got all of the definitions. And I can see here that a relevant degree means a qualification that is awarded by a higher education provider and satisfies the AQF criteria of being a level 7 or higher and includes at least 8 units of study in a designated area of study. So we need to make sure that each 3 of these limbs are met. So what we will do is we'll start with the first one. So we need to first know what is meant when the determination says higher education provider. And what we will do is we will go to the definition section of higher education provider. So I can see here it means higher education provider has the meaning given in the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency Act 2011. So what does this mean? So we have got a website where you can confirm whether or not the education provider is a higher education provider. There is a link in our on our website as well as these slides, but I'll just quickly navigate there. And this is what the website looks for. So I can search here and I can enter the provider or the course name. So I'm going to enter Queensland University of Technology. Oops. And I can see here that Queensland University of Technology is registered. So we know that, yes, the degree has been awarded by a higher education provider. The next step is determining that the degree is awarded at least an AQF level 7 or higher. So we did this previously in step 1, and we know that a bachelor's degree has got a level 7. So we know that we've got at least, we've got the right level of education as well for it to be a relevant degree. Where it gets a little bit more complicated now is about ensuring that we've met this last limb, which says it includes at least 8 units of study in a designated area of study. So what does designated area of study mean? So once again, we can go to section 5 where they define these terms. And we know that a designated area of study means each of the following. It means financial planning, investments, finance law, business law or commercial law, taxation or tax law, accounting, estate law, banking and economics. It is important to note, though, that business law or commercial law and taxation or tax law must be a course that is approved by the Tax Practitioners Board. So I can see based on Fred's degree that he has completed at least 8 units here. So we'll just put the corporations and the taxation law course to the side for the moment. But I can see that he has done an investments subject. He has done accounting. He has done banking. He has done finance. He has done estate law. He has done economics. And then what we need to do is we need to confirm that the corporations and tax law has been approved by the Tax Practitioners Board. So there is a link to the Tax Practitioners website on within this webinar. And what I will do first is I will just navigate to their website. And this is where you can search for a unit name or a code. So I know based on Fred's transcript that the corporations law subject he completed, the course code is AYB230. So I'm going to enter that now, and I'm just going to do a search. So I can see here that it is a unit that's provided by the Queensland University of Technology. That matches where Fred's got his bachelor's degree. It is corporations law, that's the unit. And it has been approved in the subject area of commercial law. So we know that this is a unit that has been approved by the Tax Practitioners Board. We need to do something similar for the taxation code. So we know from the transcript, the code is AYB 203. And I can see that there's 2 codes. They're just approved for, the one is approved for, sorry, they're both approved, and they are both approved by the Queensland University of Technology within the subject area of Australian taxation law. I can see up here. So I know that Fred has got an approved corporations law course and an approved taxation law course. Therefore, when I count up his designated areas of study, he has got at least 8 units in this designated area of study. So therefore, we know that Fred has got a relevant degree. This is because his bachelor's degree was awarded by QUT, or Queensland University of Technology, who is a higher education provider. It was awarded at an AQF level 7 because it's a bachelor's degree, and it included at least 8 units of study. It might include more, but for our purposes, we've got 8 units that meet this requirement. The second part was having an ADFP. So if we scroll back down to section 7, I can see here we've ticked off that we've got a relevant degree and now need to see whether or not we've got an ADFP. So if I scroll a little bit further, ADFP is defined to mean Advanced Diploma of Financial Planning. But what that entails, we need to scroll back to section 5 and find the exact definition. So I'm just going to scroll up to Advanced Diploma of Financial Planning, right here in section 5, and I can see that there are 6 different definitions. So the one that's applicable for us is we know that Fred has got an Advanced Diploma of Financial Services, Financial Planning. He achieved this at Kaplan, and we know that he satisfies the definition of having an ADFP. So we know that he then satisfies that item of having a relevant degree and an ADFP. We now need to see whether or not Fred needs to complete any additional subjects. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll back down to section 7 and 8, which deals with the requirements for existing providers. And I can see here on the right-hand side, so I'm looking at item 2, relevant degree plus ADFP, and I can see that he must complete a number of additional units, and he's got 1 unit to complete. So to find out what that unit is, I'm going to scroll to section 8, and I'm going to find a corresponding item number. So we know that Fred's particular fall into item 2. He's got both a relevant degree and an advanced diploma of financial planning. And then in column 3, I can see the unit that he needs to complete is an ethics for professional advisors bridging unit. So if he was to fall into a different category, they might specify 1 or more other units. But for his circumstances, because he has got a relevant degree plus an advanced diploma of financial planning, he only needs to complete the ethics unit. It is important to note that currently Fred has not completed this ethics unit, so he does not have a degree that meets the qualification standard. So if his licensee were to enter the details onto the financial advisor register now, I would enter two entries. So the first one being the bachelor's degree, the second one being the advanced diploma. However, for neither of them would I tick that tick box saying that it goes towards meeting the standard. And this is because Fred has not yet met the qualification standard. So in our example, it's now 2024, and Fred has since completed an ethics unit at the Central Queensland University. We also know that the course code is FINC 20031, Ethics and Professionalism for Financial Services. So we need to see whether or not this unit completed by Fred is appropriate for meeting the determination. So if I just scroll back to the top, I can remember that Schedule 2 is the part that deals with courses and units of study. So I'm just going to scroll to page 121 of the determination. And I can see here we've got Schedule 2, courses and units of study. Schedule 2 works very similar to Schedule 1 in the fact that we have got an item number down the left-hand side. We then only have the higher education provider name. Column 3 lists the courses and units of study. So I can see here that there's an ethics unit, but there might be another behavioural finance unit or a financial advice regulatory unit as well to be completed. And then on the last column, it lists any of the courses that are approved for the purposes of meeting the determination. So what I need to do first is I need to search for the higher education provider in Schedule 2. And I know that Fred has completed his degree at Central Queensland University, which is the first one listed in the determination. I then need to find the exact bridging unit. So we know that Fred has completed FINC 20031, Ethics and Professionalism Financial Services, which I can see here in the determination. So because Fred has now completed his ethics unit, he now has a qualification that meets the qualification standard, and we will be entering this into the financial advisors register. So from here, I will just navigate back to our ASIC Connect. So we've previously entered the details for Lulu, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another record. So I'm going to maintain another representative. Licensees can update the details of up to 25 representatives in one transaction. Here we go. Once again, it takes us back to the start of the process, and it asks us for the representative number for the financial advisors details that we are maintaining. So I'm just going to enter Fred's relevant provider number. And once again, the screen that I get at the first is asking me which details I want to update. So once again, I'm going to do the qualifications and training courses, but it's a good opportunity to update all of the details at the same time. So once again, the effective date. Here we go. We will say that this is effective as at the 1st of November. 2024. However, you might need to use a different effective date if they have completed their courses and studies at a different time. So from here, I'm just going to scroll to the next page. Once again, we'll be asked a question about whether or not the relevant provider is relying on the experienced provider pathway. So we know from our facts that Fred is not relying on the experienced provider pathway. So I will amend this from yes to no. And then I will scroll down to the education and training section. So once again here, I can see that a previous licensee has entered that he has done a finance course at TAFE in 2011. The particulars are fairly sparse and we now have all the details of his bachelor's degree. So I will remove this education and add in all the correct details for him. So for Fred, because he has got a relevant degree, which is a bachelor's degree, he's got an advanced diploma and he has got an ethics unit that he has completed, we will need at least 3 entries on this page for him. So I will start with his bachelor's degree. And we know that it's an AQF level 7. The name of the course, once again, it needs to match the determination exactly. And for him, it's a Bachelor of Business and Finance. The provider or institute, even though Queensland University of Technology is commonly known as QUT, we need to provide the name exactly as it appears in the determination. So we will be typing out Queensland University of Technology. And the year that he completed this degree. So we know that he completed this degree in 2015. So because Fred now does have a degree that meets the qualification standard, I can also tick this tick box. However, if he has not met this degree, let's say he hasn't completed his ethics unit, I would not be ticking this at this point, entering it. So that's the education for his business degree. I will now enter the details of his advanced diploma. So I will add another degree. And from the course drop-down list, I will select an advanced diploma and I will enter the name of the course exactly as it appears in the determination. The provider or institute, we often get Kaplan. However, it is important to use the full name, which is Kaplan Higher Education Pty Limited. And the year in which this qualification was attained was 2017 based on the transcripts. And once again, because Fred has met the qualification standard, I can include this tick box as well. I do have one more qualification, apologies, to add, which is the bridging unit. So from the drop-down list, I will select a bridging unit. So if it was a behavioural finance bridging unit, that option is available, as well as regulation and legal compliance. But in Fred's case, it was an ethics unit. So the name of the course, we've got to enter this exactly as it appears as per the determination. Which is FINC 20031 Ethics and Professionalism Financial Services. The provider or institute, he completed this degree at Central Queensland University. And he completed this degree in 2024. Once again, because with these 3 education pieces together, he meets the qualification standard, I need to ensure that all 3 of them are ticked, because together, that's how Fred meets the qualification standard. I will just proceed next on the transaction, and I can see here that I have got 2 details which I'm updating, and the lodgement fee is $37 per transaction. So from here, you will be asked to provide a host of declarations, including that the information that you've provided is complete and accurate, you're not providing false or misleading information to ASIC, and that you've got the authority to submit this information on behalf of the AFS licensee. So from here, it is the normal process. You will then be asked to the method in which you pay. And most licensees can either pick credit card, or you can pay it by an invoice, or you can BPay. So for us, our example, we'll just select that we'll pay later, and we'll do an invoice payment later. And lastly here, I can see that I will get a confirmation page, including my transaction details. So from here, we'll just do a quick recap before I hand over to Claire to answer any questions that you might have. It is important to note, like I said before, the qualification standard can be met in a variety of ways, and it depends on the personal circumstances of the individual. So for most existing providers, you can either have an approved degree, so a degree that's listed in Schedule 1, or you can have an equivalent qualification, and that's the process that we just went through for Fred. For people who are not existing providers, you must have an approved degree or qualification. So that equivalent qualification pathway is not open to you unless you're an existing provider. It is important to note that some existing providers, if they did not pass the exam by their exam cut-off date and they remained authorised on this date, they can't rely on that equivalent qualification pathway. They must have an approved degree. When you have a look at the academic transcripts for your relevant providers, it must match the determination exactly. So it's important to make sure that the degree matches exactly, including the commencement date. As I said throughout the session, understanding where to go in the determination is quite critical. So if I'm reviewing whether or not a bachelor degree is an approved qualification, I'll be going to Schedule 1, but Part 1. If I'm reviewing whether a postgraduate degree is an approved degree, I'll be going to Schedule 1, but Part 2. And lastly, Schedule 2 is for the courses and units of study. So all of those bridging units that the relevant provider might need to complete to ensure that they've got a qualification that meets the qualification standard. AFS licensees have an obligation to update the information on the Financial Advisors Register within 30 business days. And lastly, it is important not to click that the relevant provider, not to tick that qualification standard checkbox unless the qualification standard has been met. So it might be the fact that I have already entered previous education, but the tick box is not ticked unless the ethics unit has been completed, at which time I need to go in at the ethics unit and ensure that all the other qualifications that go towards meeting the qualification standard has been ticked as well. We do have a lot of available guidance for industry as well. So like I said, this webinar didn't particularly focus on the experienced provider pathway, but it is an alternative way in which the qualification standard can be met. We have released an information sheet 281, which can provide you more information. If you've got any questions about how the particular education or other professional standards apply to a relevant provider, ASIC has completed a quick reference guide. This is available on our website. However, you can also access the link through this webinar when we post it online. In relation to assessing the actual qualifications, our webpage titled Qualifications, Exam and Professional Development, it's got a lot of information there, including details about higher education providers and how to work through the determination. We also previously had 3 examples on our website, and they were for a relevant provider who had an approved degree, a relevant provider who had an approved degree but required a bridging unit, and then a relevant provider who had no approved degree. Yesterday, we also published 2 additional examples. It was late yesterday afternoon, so you might not have had an opportunity to see them, but they are for a relevant provider who had a relevant degree and an advanced diploma of financial planning. And we also published an example for a relevant provider who had a non-relevant degree, an 8-unit diploma of financial planning and professional study. So those units are a little bit more complicated in the facts. However, they give you a good opportunity to see how the determination should be worked through. As I mentioned earlier as well, this webinar will also be published and made available on our website, as well as the questions and answers that you ask now. So on that, I will hand over to Claire. Like I said, if you've got any questions, please send them through to the chat, but Claire will answer the ones that we've received to date.
Thanks very much, Natasha. And thanks to all of you who've sent through questions in advance of today's webinar. If any further questions have come up during the course of the webinar today, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A function, and we'll either answer them now as part of this Q&A session, or we'll incorporate them into the consolidated Q&A that we'll post on our website later. Please note that ASIC can only provide information to assist you in meeting your obligations here. We can't provide legal advice. So in some cases, it may be appropriate for you to seek advice from a qualified professional who can consider your particular circumstances and tell you how the law applies to your particular circumstances. For this reason, where we've received specific queries that relate to individual circumstances, we've simplified and generalised these questions so that they can be answered in this forum. Our first question is, ASIC Connect only allows me to input 5 qualifications or training courses relevant to the provision of financial services. How can I include more? This one, we've recently updated the forms, so you can now list up to 10 qualifications or training courses. So that should hopefully resolve this question. Our second question is, how do I determine which qualifications or courses should be recorded on the Financial Advisors Register? So here you should record the educational qualifications and training courses that the advisors completed that are relevant to the provision of financial services. Where a qualification or a course is relevant to the provision of financial services is ultimately a matter for AFS licensees and relevant providers to determine. Our third question is there an expectation that all relevant financial planning courses are to be included on the Financial Advisors Register, or only those that demonstrate compliance with the qualification standard? So as just mentioned, the qualifications and training courses completed by the advisor that are relevant to the provision of financial services should be listed on the Financial Advisors Register. Where the qualification or training course goes towards the relevant provider meeting the qualification standard, though, it must be marked as such by ticking the relevant checkbox. Any other qualifications or training courses that are relevant to the provision of financial services should also be listed, but unless they go towards the relevant provider meeting the qualification standard, they should not be marked as such. Our next question is, if we're unable to enter in all qualifications that have been completed in order to fulfil the qualification standard, will ASIC be seeking an attestation or any other further information from the AFSL to ensure that we've assessed the qualifications to determine that all criteria have been met? We think that this question might have been posted with the old form in mind, where you could only submit 5 qualifications or training courses. So as mentioned, this has now been increased to 10. But in relation to the second part of the question, as part of ASIC's ongoing enforcement and compliance work, ASIC will check compliance with the professional standards, including the qualification standard, on an ongoing basis. AFS licensees may be required to provide further information to ASIC regarding their assessment of compliance with the professional standards as part of this work. Our next question relates to the provision of tax financial advice services. So here the question is, if an advisor has completed a qualification and that qualification includes specified units in commercial law and taxation law, which are required to provide tax financial advice services to retail clients, do we need to separately list these units as well as the qualification itself on the Financial Advisors Register? So the short answer is no. If one or both of the specified courses are included in the broader qualification, there's no need to list these courses separately on the Financial Advisors Register. But if they were completed separately to the broader qualification, then they do need to be listed separately on the Financial Advisors Register. But unless these courses go towards the relevant provider meeting the qualification standard, then the courses shouldn't be marked as such. We've now got some more kind of administrative questions. The first is, When will a recording of the webinar be made available on the ASIC website? So we hope to have it available on the ASIC webpage that's titled Qualification, Exam and Professional Development in the next few days. Our next question is, how much does it cost to include a financial advisor's qualifications and training courses on the Financial Advisors Register? You may have seen in the demo that fees did come up there, but I'll go through it in a little bit more detail here. So where an AFS licensee is including this information on the Financial Advisors Register as part of appointing a financial advisor, there's no additional cost associated with including this information, and the usual appointment fee of $59 would apply. Where an AFS licensee is updating or maintaining a financial advisor's qualifications and training courses, a fee of $37 would apply. Where an AFS licensee updates multiple pieces of information about a single financial advisor in a single transaction, only one fee per advisor would apply though. And where a financial advisor's details change, an AFS licensee must update the Financial Advisors Register within 30 business days of the change. Otherwise, a late fee will apply, but the details of up to 25 advisors can be updated through ASIC Connect by an AFS licensee at any one time. Our next question is, I'm having trouble logging into ASIC Connect. Should I email the FAR Inquiries email address for assistance? No, unfortunately, that email inbox can't assist you with ASIC Connect queries. So you're best to either call the ASIC Client Contact Centre on 1300 300 630 or lodge an online query with ASIC. Is there a guide with screenshots on how to update an advisor's details on ASIC Connect? Yes, there is. It's titled How to Maintain a Financial Advisor's Details, and it's available on ASIC's website. Our next question is, what if we would like to input more than 10 qualifications or courses? How should we prioritise which qualifications or courses to list? Priority here should be given to the courses and qualifications that go towards the advisor meeting the qualification standard, but ultimately it's a matter for AFS licensees to determine which qualifications and training courses should be listed on the Financial Advisors Register. Our next question asks, where can I find out more information about the Experienced Provider Pathway? As Natasha mentioned, ASIC's developed information sheet 281, and it provides guidance for relevant providers seeking access to the Experienced Provider Pathway, including guidance on the declaration that the relevant provider is required to make. It also provides guidance to AFS licensees on the requirement to notify ASIC when they receive a declaration from an experienced provider that they authorise. Generally, the Experienced Provider Pathway enables experienced providers to meet the qualification standard and the professional year standard without needing to undertake further education and training. To be eligible to access the pathway, a person must meet the definition of an experienced provider. So that is where they're a relevant provider for at least 10 years during the period 1st of January 2007 through to the 31st of December 2021. And they had a clean disciplinary record as at the 31st of December 2021. In addition to that requirement, the person must have been authorised to provide personal advice on the exam cut-off day that applied to them, and they must have passed the exam before that cut-off day. Or their authorisation to provide personal advice was ceased before their exam cut-off day, and they passed the financial advisor exam before being reauthorised to provide personal advice. It's quite complex, so we definitely recommend that you seek further information about the Experienced Provider Pathway, the declaration that's required to be made by the individual accessing the pathway, and the notification required to be made by the person's AFS licensee to ASIC. To do this, you can take a look at information sheet 281. Our next question is, I can't work out if I meet the qualification standard. can I email ASIC for help? The short answer, unfortunately, is no. ASIC staff are unable to give advice about whether individual people meet the qualification standard. ASIC's provided guidance, though, in this webinar and on the ASIC website in relation to how the qualifications assessments can be completed. Treasury's also provided some really useful information on their website in relation to this topic. ASIC encourages AFS licensees and relevant providers to obtain their own independent advice specific to their individual circumstances if they remain unsure about how the qualification standard applies to them. I do have a few more questions, but I note that we're right on time. So I might look to wrap up now, and we will post, as we mentioned, a consolidated Q&A document on the ASIC website shortly, together with a recording of the webinar and associated slide deck. As I mentioned, the relevant webpage is the Qualification Exam and Professional Development webpage. And as Natasha mentioned, we've got 5 example qualification assessments available on that webpage. You just need to click on the qualifications banner and they'll be in the drop-down list for you. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll end the webinar now.